everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just getting our live streaming started. Okay, 7:30, Mataji, would you like to begin? We're live on YouTube.
Yes, Radhika, thank you. Very wonderful to be with all of you again this week, and we will cover today chapter 5 of Canto 1, and this is a series of chapters dealing with the conversation between Vyasadeva and Narad Muni. So in the last chapter, which was chapter 4, we heard the 3 questions of the sages. The first question was, what inspired Vyasadeva to write the Srimad Bhagavatam? And for after all, Vyasadeva had already written volumes of work. He had written the 4 Vedas, 18 Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, and many other books. So why did he undergo another major work, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which was also another 18,000 verses? To answer that question, Sutta Goswami, he narrates the history of Vyasadeva, who after seeing Kali Yuga approaching, he divided the Vedas into 4, and he wrote the Mahabharata, which is a summary of the entire Vedas, the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is kind of a hidden jewel within that Mahabharata. But in spite of writing so much, Vyasadeva was feeling despondent, dissatisfied. So in this chapter, it will be pointed out, Narad Muni will point out why he's feeling dissatisfied. And basically, he's going to tell him quite simply and quite directly that he has not sufficiently glorified the Supreme Personality of Godhead and emphasized devotional service unto him as the highest dharma. Okay. Now, the Vedas that he told him that he had just divided into 4 for simplicity, like we read in the last chapter, how he was feeling sorry for the people of Kali Yuga, and because it was they were not very intelligent and their duration of life was small, so he had divided the Vedas into 4. But the Vedas generally mainly deal with subject matters concerning mundane religiosity, sense gratification, economic development, and liberation. Now, there may be sections that directly deal with bhakti or devotional service, but as Narad Muni will point out in this chapter, they are a small ratio compared to the vast sections on karma kanda, or the methods of performing rituals and sacrifices for the purpose of gaining greater material facilities. So, so this chapter is very meaningful because here Prabhupada is going to discuss how Srimad Bhagavatam really stands out, quite unique in front of all the Vedas, and why it is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, why it is the ripened fruit of the Vedic tree. And even though the rest of the Vedas is vast. I mean, for example, we heard last time that how Mahabharata is like 220,000 verses. There's 18 Puranas, and there's like Skanda Purana, which is like 400,000 verses. So just about everything, and so people may ask, well, why I can't read one of these Puranas? Well, the reason is because we can read all we won't be able to even finish even one of them. So what is the purpose? Better we read the summary of the entire purport of the Vedas. So this chapter is very meaningful, very, very meaningful. And it has some very powerful purports by Srila Prabhupada. It begins with the entrance of the great sage Narad Muni, and who comes to the cottage of Vyasadeva to help him out of despondency. As is always the case, when the Supreme Lord always helps his devotees at the time of their dilemma or troubles. And so Narad Muni's coming is divinely inspired by Krishna himself. So similar theme is in the Dhruva story, when Krishna sent Narad Muni to guide little Dhruva in the devotional path when he left home, all by himself to seek out the Lord. So this makes a nice comparison for our children and it can be discussed. So, so let's begin by reading chapter 5 of Canto 1, and we'll recite the first shloka. So this chapter is called Narad's Instructions to Srila Vyasadeva. Sutta vacha athatam sukham asina upasinam raj shava devarshi praha viprasim vina pani smayan iva. Sutta Goswami said, thus the sage among the gods, Narada, comfortably seated and apparently smiling, addressed the rishi amongst the brahmanas, Vedavyas. So as soon as Narada Muni comes, he doesn't wait, but gets to the point immediately and begins to probe his disciple. Now, this I thought was really nice, because generally when we meet somebody, we go to the niceties, right? We ask them, how are you? Is your health okay? These kind of things. Is your family okay? But for a pure devotee, he's already understood that they are on a higher platform beyond the body. So Vyasadeva, however, he glorifies him wonderfully when he meets him. He tells Narad Muni that he's like the sun and the air, because he purifies people's hearts, and like the air, he enters into the hearts of, he's all pervading, and he enters into the hearts of everyone. So therefore, he's praying to him. Vyasadeva is praying to him that to please enter his heart and to cure his despondency. Because frankly, he cannot understand why. He's done everything that Narad Muni asked him to do. He's done everything to take care of people's material and spiritual needs. So that's what he thinks, and he cannot figure out what's wrong with him. So in the same way, just in the last chapter, I think it was in chapter 2, Sutta Goswami prays in the same way to Shukadeva Goswami, his spiritual master, that he also enter his heart and inspire him to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. You may recall that he was saying that how he had Shukadeva Goswami had entered even the dull trees, and so he's praying to him, asking for mercy. Now, interesting point to note here is how Vyasadeva is such a big scholar, right? I mean, there's nobody who can write that much that we know of, right? So how wonderfully he's humbling himself in front of his spiritual master. And so it teaches us a lesson, a wonderful lesson, that no matter how we may be very big or famous or may do wonderful things, but yet we always need the guidance of others, especially our spiritual master, who can actually guide us through our false ego or through our anarthas. So in this way, Narad Muni very quite directly he tells Vyasadeva, and in a way he chides him, and he says, "Are you satisfied with identifying with your body and mind?" And then he elaborates further that actually, when we identify with our body and mind, we are really very dissatisfied, because it doesn't satisfy us, because we are not this body, only things related to the soul. If we do whatever we do, if we connect it to Krishna, who's part and to whom we are part and parcel, then we will become satisfied. Just like the hand, is part of the body. The hand is happy only when it feeds the body, but on its own is quite useless, right? So in this way, Narad Muni is identifying the cause of Vyasadev's distress. He's actually helping his disciples see what could go wrong, right? He said, you have explained karma, you have explained the Vedanta Sutra, which basically is about personal Brahman, And you've explained the fruitive activities in the Vedas. So in this way, he's probing his disciple. So Vyasadeva, after that, he's feeling lacking, of course. He's feeling a lack. And so therefore, Narad Muni tells him at this point, quite directly actually, that you're feeling dissatisfied because you have not sufficiently described the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now that's an interesting point, because after all, he does describe the process of bhakti and devotional service. There is mention of that in several parts of the Vedas, particularly the Bhagavad Gita, which is pure devotional literature. So how is it that he's feeling dissatisfied? Now, so Narad Muni here points out that the reason why he's dissatisfied because he has not sufficiently and repeatedly described the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I thought this was really, really interesting, that we can make an emphasis and point out to the children that actually Krishna consciousness is not like an armchair type thing where we once a week we go and to the temple and bow our heads down at the temple. No, Krishna consciousness is about feeling the presence of Krishna in everything that we do, in everything that we do. So therefore, this point is very, very particular that Narad Muni is telling Vyasadeva, that the reason why your Vedas, the rest of the Vedas is quite useless is because it has not sufficiently described the glories of the Lord. Now, in other words, the ratio of direct glorification of Krishna versus indirect glorification is very big. It's very big. And also when people follow the different rituals or sacrifices or different processes, they get sidetracked, isn't it? They get sidetracked because then they start thinking, well, this is it. This is what religion is meant for, is to satisfy one's material needs and to try to expand it. So, and then the purpose is lost. So the purpose is lost because that will not satisfy them, and they will continue to be entangled in this world and suffer. So, so in the next slide, in verses 10 and 11, which are very important, and these purports are just so amazing. In fact, actually, if you want to teach your children writing, these purports are very good to use as pieces of powerful writing that Prabhupada has given here. So I would like to read the translation of these two verses, which are very important. Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation, full of transcendental words directed towards bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that crows and swans are not birds of the same feather because of their different mental attitudes. For example, the crows are compared to the fruitive workers or the passionate people, and whereas the all perfectly saintly people are compared to the swans. So in the same way, there are different types of literatures. Mundane literature, it can be very well presented in flowery language, but yet it's like prose, it's like, which is quite useless because it's like decoration of a dead body because it has no connection with Krishna. Spiritually advanced men, Prabhupada writes, do not take pleasure in them. It is pleasure only for those who are spiritually dead. But then he contrasts it by transcendental literature, which may be very imperfect right? May not be perfect and not so flowery, but yet it is attractive to the transcendentalist. Why? Because, like the translation says, such literature creates a revolution in the hearts of the people of a misdirected civilization. Misdirected civilization. So sometimes we think civilization means all this technological advancement, but real civilization means Vedic culture. So that's why Prabhupada calls it misdirected civilization. And because of that, actually, Prabhupada stressed book distribution so much because of the importance of this transcendental literature. Transcendental literature. Actually, mundane literature gets very old, isn't it? Gets very old and stale. But transcendental literature is ever fresh. In fact, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur once mentioned that how there's so much newer and newer pastimes in the spiritual world that you could have a newspaper just about every minute of the day. Whereas when we read a newspaper, the next day we can't even look at it. Right? It's too old now. So Prabhupada stressed book distribution because he said that how even by just seeing the book, it will purify the hearts and the mind of the people. Why? Because they're meant for the glorification of Krishna, and therefore they're potent. So in the next slide, in text 12 and 13, Narad Muni clarifies that not only ordinary literature devoid that not only ordinary literature that is
Yes.
devoid of
Ritvik.
There's somebody there, who's making some noise. Okay, so Narad Muni clarifies that not only ordinary literatures, which are not about not emphasizing glorification of the Lord, they're condemned, but also those Vedic literatures that deal with impersonal Brahman. Why? Because they're also devoid of devotional service. Right? We did cover that in the second chapter, where we talked about the different three aspects of God. In the third chapter, and so we can point that out to the children because that topic was covered in terms of the three aspects of God, right? Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So now both, he explains that they are painful either in the beginning or at the end. Now, why is material fruitive work painful? So this can be explained very nicely with an example that is quite direct. Prabhupada gives about a donkey, how he works very, very hard, and he's for the washerman. And that, if you go to India, you can see that all the time. And he puts the heaviest load on that poor donkey, and the poor donkey carries it all day. And at the end of the day, he gets some grass. So in the same way, a materialist, he's hoping that in the future, he's going to get some pleasure. But pleasure is temporary and is transient. Now, at this point, Narad Muni also praises Vyasadeva. And he tells him that actually you are a Shakti Avesh avatar of the Lord. And therefore, you are qualified to write pure transcendental literature. And actually, in chapter 7, we will hear about Vyasadeva, how he sits down in pure consciousness, and he focuses on the absolute truth. He focuses on Krishna's Shakti, Maya Shakti, and in his trance. And at that point, he will write the Srimad Bhagavatam, and which he gives in scheduled doses. In other words, through all the cantos. He takes us through all the cantos, all the way up to 10th canto and 11th and 12th canto. So Narad Muni mentions how Vyasadeva's qualifications, they qualify him to write. Not everybody can write such pure Krishna conscious literature. Right? Nobody can describe the past and the Lord, even though unless he's a pure devotee, right? And even the works that people do, all the scholarly works that people do for thousands of years, they still don't satisfy the heart. There's always a vacuum that remains in the heart. So in this way, this point is emphasized greatly in in verses 12 and 13. Now, in the next 15 and 16 verses, Narad Muni is going to kind of conclude everything. He's going to tell Vyasadeva what he finds wrong in his work, right? Which he's already exposed to some extent. But he does it further by criticizing how the Vedas, they are mainly talking about going from one heavenly planet to another, enjoying and defeating one's enemy. As we know, in the planets of the demigods, the demigods are also fighting with their enemies, with the Rakshasas, right? It's all about health and wealth. It's all about progeny, children, and in this way, and family. So in this way, the mind is, like I mentioned earlier, gets carried away, just like a boat when in a wind, on any windy day, it is carried away, very, very far away. So even though Vedic literatures help a person to stay on the material platform of goodness, yet they are not, because they are not, anchored on the absolute truth, people's mind get drawn away from the real thing, from the Lord's pastimes to other things, right? To other mundane things. And they get confused. So the problem is they get confused about what real spiritual path is. They wonder, oh, should I do this yoga, that yoga? Should I do karma yoga? Should I practice mystic yoga? Should I become a renunciate? So all this is confusing, and people tend to take the wrong path. So, then, of course, we have to understand that Vedas in itself is not bad. I mean, Vyasadeva actually meant it for a well-meaning purpose. He wanted to give a gradual path of spiritual advancement through regulated sense enjoyment. The problem is that people, because they're not guided, like I said in my last class, because they're not guided by discipline, by guru and parampara, they end up, thinking that this is the end all of everything. And they don't actually get to the point that the real purpose of the Vedas. So in this way, people become degraded because they indulge so much in materialistic life. And there will be a risk. So, of course, if they are protected when they even follow these Vedic rituals, because it's some way or the other, they are regulated. We see today how, people, because they follow no regulation, how life becomes very degraded. Right? So, in verse 17 next, and 18 and 19, Narad Muni, he explains the benefit of taking the spiritual path, even if one does not succeed completely. Right? And this becomes a very interesting point for our children, because as you can see in my slide, I have, given many examples, which is discussed by Prabhupada in the pulpit. The story of Bharat Maharaj, who left his kingdom and family to go to the forest to practice devotional service, but fell down due to affection for a baby deer. Now, Bharat Maharaj had come to the platform of bhava practically, which is like a preliminary stage to prema. But he fell down, even in spite of being on such a high platform, due to attachment to a baby deer. So it's very, very, one has to be very, very vigilant. But it was nothing, not all was lost. He became a deer in his next life, and in his third life, he became Jad Bharat. Beautiful section of the Bhagavatam, describing the 3 lives of Bharat Maharaj. And then he preached to King Rahugna, and then went back to Godhead. So he went through 3 lifetimes. Now, Chitraketu is also mentioned by Prabhupada, that we can discuss with our children. We could tell them the story, or we can read that story. Chitraketu, he was also a big, very famous king, and one time he was cursed by Mother Parvati, and he became a demon in his next life, Vritasura, in the 6th canto, the beautiful story of Vritasura, Indra and Bahaspati. And he And in spite of that horrible birth as a demon, he actually came out to be the most exalted devotee, and Krishna actually took him to the spiritual world. Beautiful section that is worth reading. And then, of course, the story of Ajamil, right, who fell down with a prostitute. He was actually raised to be a good Brahmana, but he fell down with a prostitute. But in the end of his life, he called out his son, Narayan, who was called Narayan. And as soon as he uttered that word, the messengers came and saved him from being dragged to hell. And of course, he came to his senses and reformed himself and went back to Godhead. So in this way, we can give many, many examples to our children. And this way, it becomes a real thing for them that yes, whatever one does is not lost in spiritual life. But whatever progress we make in material life is finished at the time of death. Is finished at the time of death. So there is no harm. So in other words, Narad Muni is telling Vyasadeva that by giving pure devotional service, the knowledge of pure devotional service in Srimad Bhagavatam, even though people may not, finish their spiritual life and go back to Godhead, yet there's no loss. But when you compare that with all the vast Vedas, where the essential point is missing, and that is devotional service to the Lord, then one has gained practically nothing. So, so in this way, Narad Muni makes his point very, very strongly, very, very strongly. And Prabhupada actually, he understood that, and he, encouraged the devotees in that way, how to take the holy name of the Lord. And even though we may not be doing it perfectly, in fact, during his time when, there would be sometimes negative comments about the Hare Krishnas in the public, in the media, then Prabhupada would never be actually affected by that. He would say, even if one calls out the name of Krishna, even in a joking way or in a ridiculing way, they are making advancement, because there's no loss in spiritual life to whatever extent we do. Right? So in this way, Narad Muni is making that point very, very strongly, and Prabhupada is making that point. So now in text 20, 21, 20, and 22, Narad Muni explains another point. So you can see how the pattern is going. First he's emphasizing the point that why Vyasadeva is dissatisfied, and then he proves that point through different angles, that how even if people practice just even a little bit, still there's no loss. And now he's going to make the point that that nothing is separate from Krishna. Why? Because Krishna is the source of everything, and there's nothing separate from him. And there's nothing that's not connected to the Lord, except our consciousness, right? When our consciousness is disconnected, when we are in Maya, right? So in this is also a wonderful way to, we can, through this point, we can teach our children a very practical point, how to use everything in the service of the Lord. How to use everything in the service of the Lord. And we can show them how to connect in practical ways, like cooking, cleaning, dancing, singing, art. So in a practical life, day-to-day life, by connecting everything, even if they're playing, by connecting it to Krishna, they can get this point really across in a practical way. So, and of course, Prabhupada gives very wonderful examples of Valmiki, who was a great poet, who wrote poetry. He used his talent. And Vyasadeva, who's a great writer, he wrote Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course, Arjuna, who used his skills of fighting for Krishna. And Hanuman also used his strength and service to Lord Ram. So Prabhupada explains how, in the same way, science and philosophy should also be engaged in the service of God. And such science and philosophy, if engaged in the service of the Lord, is no longer mundane. It's very, very transcendental. So, So therefore, he's in a way he's encouraging Vyasadeva that you should present all the activities of Krishna, And you should expand that more and more and more all the way, because after all, engaging things in service of engaging our talents and our gifts that Krishna has given in the service of the Lord is not the end all. There's more beyond that. One still has to, this is a duty, and then one still has to love Krishna. One has to learn how to love Krishna. After all, love is higher than duty. And so he's telling Vyasadeva that ultimately you have to present all the personal activities of Krishna, and that then he's talking about the 10th canto, So in this way, and that kind of leads us into the next part of this chapter, where Narad Muni is going to explain by his own example how he went through these stages of bhakti. Remember in the second chapter, we talked about these stages of bhakti, right? The 9 stages of bhakti, starting with Shraddha and all the way to Prema. And this becomes very like a practical thing now to use that information in the life story of Narad Muni, which will also be explained in the next chapter. So we don't want to, we are not going to emphasize too much over here, the 9 processes of bhakti, the 9 stages of bhakti, but just the initial point is made here, that how Narad Muni gives his part of his story here, and then he gives the complete story in the next chapter of how he came to Krishna consciousness. He came from a very insignificant position, just like the child of a maidservant. His mother was a maidservant who would clean the ashrams of these great sages who would visit this place during the 4 months of rainy season. And then Prabhupada actually in the purport he explains in great length about the habits of these great sages, how they would they would be so detached, and how they would travel actually in this season or rainy season, and they would stay in one place, and people would actually go and take benefit of that and get their holy association. So Narad Muni got that benefit due to Krishna's plan, for him. And so it's a very, very, very powerful story, which has great meaning for us, even though we cannot imitate Narad Muni, but yet it's a great lesson for us, it's something that we should take it as a guidepost, and help our children understand through this story how Narad Muni came from such a humble beginning, but because he actually didn't even know who his father was, but because he had the great fortune to associate with these great personalities, he was he got the association, he got to engage in their personal service, and that helps us to, make that point with the children and actually practically create that humility and that mood of humble service by serving other devotees and pure devotees when they visit. So, and of course, service begins with service of Krishna. Service to God begins with service to Krishna, to his devotees. And then Prabhupada also talks about the association with devotees, how it makes the fortune of the devotees. This is where our fortune is. Right? Why? Because these devotees, they pour the glories of the Lord into the ears of those who serve them. So Narad Muni gets their causeless mercy. Now, another very deep point that Prabhupada makes here is that he gets his causeless mercy. Now, causeless mercy would mean that there is no cause, it just happens, right? And there's no cause that went through to get something, right? However, it talks about how Narad Muni did qualify himself, Prabhupada explains how he was qualified. He invoked that causeless mercy by being by being a very good boy, by listening carefully, by serving them, by eating their remnants. So he invoked their mercy and received their causeless mercy of the sages. So in our last slide, it just continues where Narad Muni, the beautiful story of how he a little boy, as you can see, the little boy, he's eating, he's serving them, he's with them, and he's eating their remnants. And he explains, and Narad Muni says how when these Bhakti Vedantas, they came, by the association, he actually took on their very nature. He took on their very nature. So when we associate with somebody saintly, we actually start developing their nature to a minuscule amount, right? And so he naturally became attracted to Krishna. So this is the result of service to a devotee. Right? And so he got that taste, and his taste for hearing, and his taste became so strong and so unflinching that all modes of nature went away. All passion and ignorance went away. And actually, when the reigning season ended and the sages were leaving, Narad Muni was very, very sad. His heart was breaking because he was attached to them and their association. So in the next chapter, we will hear more about Narad Muni, and the next chapter actually moves very quickly. In 2 days, Narad Muni will leave Vyasadeva and with full revelation of the truth. So this becomes a very interesting story for our children, and the story of Narad Muni, and it's like a success story for all of us. So how and we get to know the secrets of devotional life and how to follow in his footsteps. So I know that all these points that I stressed, I emphasized in this presentation. A lot of them have been covered in the activities that Sri Radhika Mataji will now present to you, the activities, the key points of this chapter. So thank you very much.
Hi, Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. I'll just take a few seconds to get set up for my part. Open my PowerPoint. Okay. Okay. Good morning. Hi, Krishna, everyone. Thank you for continuing with us week after week. So, chapter 5, after we have hopefully read the purpose in advance and then sat down and read the translations with our child or children, then we are ready to move on to the comprehensive guide for young readers. And this is a very exciting section of the book, particularly because it's the story of a child hero. Radha Mataji often emphasizes giving these role models to our children, the child heroes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, so that it's someone relatable for them. And Narada Muni provides exactly that, the story of a child that perfects his life in Krishna consciousness. So, just 1 second. I'm trying to change the view here. Okay. So I have taught this chapter in multiple settings, at home as well as, I see someone is annotating, so I'm having to adjust technology a little bit. Disable annotation. Okay. I've taught this in multiple settings, so you'll see pictures from Sunday school as well as the homeschool co-op, and of course at home, and then multiple times also in different Sunday schools in St. Louis and Chicago. The book begins with providing a child-friendly story summary. And it's written very beautifully to provide a dialogue and very conversation style that makes it very interesting for the child. So Narada Muni was now comfortably seated in Vyasadeva's ashram. He had a slight smile on his face because he knew why Vyasadeva was feeling troubled and what exactly was missing from his endeavors to help the people. In this way, Narada began to prod him with questions. Are you feeling satisfied now? Began Narada to Vyasadeva. You've written so many religious scriptures showing people how to become materially happy and eventually to merge with Lord Krishna's light. This was a hint. So again, you can see, the story, the summary goes on and provides a real easy way for the child to understand the flow of the story. And also, I really like how there are illustrations and coloring opportunities for children. So I don't have to find like separate coloring sheets for the younger children, while the older ones are reading the story summary with me, and they can just sit in class and color right there on the same page where the story summary is. Again, I'm sorry, someone is annotating, so let me just deal with this technology one more time. Okay, that should stop it. Okay. And Vrinda Kishori Devidasi has put her Bhagavatam summaries. She's also
Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna, everybody.
This is Vrinda and
Lali.
and
Danny.
Janaki. Today we'll be going through chapter 5 of Canto 1, Narada's instructions on the Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's open the Bhagavatam. What do we see? Krishna! He's standing in front of me. You do the Vedas. Oh, he doesn't feel very happy and he's not sure why, but luckily his spiritual master's there. Let's have a peek and see what they're doing. Oh, Narada Muni is having a look at the Vedas. Let's open the book and let's flick through the pages. Rig Veda.
So I'll pause there. Vrinda Kishori is also the author, and of course, there's editing and Mataji, finally put the books together. But these story summaries have been written by her, and you can see that they're very beautifully written, as well as she has these on SoundCloud in case anyone's interested to get these recordings and play them at home or in your other settings where you teach. The chapter also provides key messages, and this is real nice for adults more so. I personally have not used these with children when I teach, but personally when I'm studying the chapter and preparing for my study or discussion with the children, then I use these key messages. Helps me organize my thoughts in terms of, okay, so these verses have this key message and this theme. Also, understanding the story provides some nice multiple choice questions. As I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, as well as last week, that if any of you are now teaching on Zoom, like I am from this book, I find the breakout rooms, a really great way to do these questions where I can club the children into smaller groups, and then they have to come up with these with the answers to the questions, and we come back to the main room. And of course, it can be done in Sunday school. Here's, I don't know, the picture's not very clear, but you can see the children are working on exactly this page from the book, understanding the story. And I have a younger child there that's coloring, and then of course, older children. And what I normally do here, you can see on the board, in Sunday school, as we're discussing, I'll put 1, B, 2. So I put those answers on the board, and you can see now we've gone through all 17 questions, and all the options are on the board. I really like the higher thinking questions, and I normally go through those when I'm studying and preparing for the study with the children, and I write them with a pencil in my own Bhagavatam so that I can ask these thought-provoking questions. Mataji brought up some of these in her own PowerPoint presentation. So for instance, they wrote the Mahabharata, which talks about Krishna. So why did Narada say he hasn't glorified Krishna? That's a really nice, thoughtful question to ask children. These are questions that can be provided to older children as a writing exercise or in a Google Classroom setting if you're doing it online. I've done both of these. And, especially with the younger children, it's more a matter of discussing, not so much that they'll be writing answers to these questions. Some other questions such as, do you think that the solution that Narada Muni offered to Vyasadeva was correct? And then explain your answer. So from this chapter, one of the main themes that Mataji presented was association. And this is a real nice practical activity that takes that from the book, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and puts it into practice for a child. So we came up with a list. This week, be a real eager beaver to get the association of devotees and list out everything that you'd like to do. And then, let's come together at the end of the week in Sunday school or at home and see what did you learn and what or who inspired you the most and why, as you engaged in either serving the devotees, prasadam, cooking, cleaning for them, or attending morning program, or attending a Harinam or book distribution in the association of devotees. So this activity brings the whole analogy of the crow and the swan to life. There's a resource at the back of the chapter that has a template for a swan. And, there are questions given here where you can discuss the analogy philosophically with the child. And then, of course, take it into action. So the encouragement is for the facilitator or the teacher to make a copy of the template, which I did. And then all the children are cutting their swans out. And then I also projected on my TV screen a book. So, they were sketching Srimad Bhagavatam. So the swan-like devotees naturally are attracted to literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam. So here they are sketching the Srimad Bhagavatam, so their Bhagavad Gitas. And this is my older son that has, finished this activity. And he even has cotton for the wings of the swan and waves in the pond, and it's a very beautiful pond. And here, this child, he used glue, a hot glue gun to make the waves in the pond. Devotees are compared to swans and Paramahamsas that are attracted to the glories of the Lord. So this is my homeschooling co-op. And then I also did this in Sunday school, but for some reason, I don't know why I didn't make photocopies. So I just had the children sketch from the book. So, so you'll see in Sunday school, they're sketching and coloring and cutting their swans. And we also made crows. And we did 2 posters per child. So the saintly persons are like swans and they're attracted to the Bhagavatam, and crow-like mentality is not to be attracted, spelling there, to Krishna. So this was a really, really beautiful activity from the book. Not only is the swan, the Paramahamsas that talked about throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a very nice way to drive that philosophical point home. This is a nice activity that talks about literatures, the different literatures that we come across in our devotional lives, and for the child to understand who wrote it, what is it about, is it beneficial for spiritual life, or can it be used indirectly in the service of the Lord? And perhaps, again, this is for older children. With a younger child, it's more a matter of discussion. But you can see, here my son was pretty young, and yet he was able to write to some extent. It wasn't as elaborate as it would have been if, for instance, I do it with him now. More activities. This is one that we did as a debate. It's never too early. So we divided the class into 2. And one was the group that says, oh, spiritual life is for when you're old, don't waste your time being bored now, enjoy life. And the other group is, no, look at Narada Muni. Only at the age of 5, he took up serving the sages and became completely purified. Also, the book hints of giving the example of Prahlad Maharaj and his teachings an example, Kaumara Acharat Pragya, don't waste your time begin from the tender age of childhood, and oh, you waste so many years in just, you know, having intense gratification, so many years of your life just in sleep, so you hardly have any time left. Take it up now. So this is a very nice practical activity from this chapter that can be done as a debate. And I want to show you this one. It's a really nice activity from the book where there are pictures that can be matched to the devotional activities that Narada Muni engaged in. And here's an example from one of my Sunday school children's books where you know, they're understanding these different processes that Narada took up, and they're connecting them to the pictures, the illustrations given in the book. So here they are in Sunday school, matching up, and I have them work in pairs. So you can see children are sitting in pairs, and some of them are also coloring the pictures, looking over the shoulders of others. And another activity where you write a letter of appreciation or make a gift to a devotee that you appreciate. Also writing an entry in a diary, explaining how he's feeling after the sages have left and what impressions did those sages make on him. Report writing for older children, where adjectives, verbs, and nouns are provided, and the child writes a report, like a news report, about what happened, and using past tense. The writing prompt says keywords, so understanding, and you know, there's a nice way to teach vocabulary from the Srimad Bhagavatam itself. Here's a word search, and the reason you see the words on the bottom on the right is because I have the original version of the book, and in the revised version, the words have just been put to the right rather than at the bottom. So word search is always fun for children, and here's an example from the work from one of my Sunday school children, and here you can see, if you can see in the picture, they're working on the word search right here. So there's a very nice poem in this chapter, and again, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur did, you know, explaining the philosophy through folk songs to villagers. So here are children that are learning the philosophy through songs. And in chapter 6 of the guidebook, there is an encouragement to make Narada Muni puppets. So we made those puppets. Sometimes, you know, when the chapters are related or the themes are related, it's nice to go back and forth in the guidebook and see if there's an activity that you'd like to do from another chapter that's related. So we made those puppets of Narada Muni, and then we had the puppets kind of perform this poem, and I can show you a video.
That is when my devotional service was once again begun. I was innocent, self-controlled, quiet, and not naughty. So some traveling sages gave me their mercy. Once when they agreed, I took the remnants of their food. I was purified in my heart and attained their saintly mood. In their association, I increased my desire to hear. As my taste developed, the lower modes of nature disappeared. If there is anything you can learn from my past life's narration, it is to seek out the mercy of saintly association. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
So I've got to correct them in between. You know, my younger son was like,
Previous life, I was a
twirling Narada Muni as if there's no tomorrow. Okay, and then in Sunday school, we did it differently. We sang the song and went around and really had fun with the poem, and everybody memorized the poem. So they memorized the philosophy in the form of the poem. And of course, answers at the end for the teacher or facilitator. So you can make avail of these books through Amazon in the USA or United Kingdom and surrounding areas. And for India, Golden Age Media is the publisher, not just for India, but also, again, for surrounding areas. You can take advantage of these books. All right. That brings me to the end of what I wanted to share.
I just want to emphasize, point out something that how these activities, how there's a variety of activities in each chapter. And if you're approaching the Bhagavatam through these guidebooks where your child is already older, like maybe 10, 11, 12, you can still use these books very well, because in every chapter, there's going to be activities for older children. As you may have noticed, we had the introspective activities, and we had an activity on comparison of the 9 stages of bhakti to the verses in the second chapter of the first canto, like that. So there's many, many activities that are also geared for older children. So, and also the ones that are for younger children, they can be adapted to also cater for the older children. And I'm sure, Radhika Mataji, when you approached this, when you were doing originally these books, your children were a lot older or younger, and now they're older. And so but you've already passed that. So now you're on third canto, right? So this is so we are making our books a little bit for tougher as we are going, because we are assuming that the child would have grown, over the years. And so the second, third, and fourth canto will be slightly different, where we are going to cater again for younger children as well, but cater more to the older children. So just to make that point. Radhika, you want to add anything?
No, that sounds great. I think we can move on to the questions section of our meeting today. And I'm going to invite Adi Gaurangi Mataji to please ask a question.
Hi, Krishna Mataji. Thank you for the nice lesson today. I had a question. I'm teaching 12 to 14-year-olds in Sunday school. My plan was to read Bhagavatam with them, as you suggested, and just do the translations. But if we do the higher thinking questions, do they need to read the purports for those verses in order to answer them? Or should I be summarizing the purports for them? How best to answer those higher thinking questions for those children?
Yes, I mean, at that point, I mean, if they are 12 to 14, you could definitely go into the purports. And this way they, start reading purports once in a while, right? So yes, because the questions always give in parentheses the verse number. So you know exactly where the answer is, in which purport. So definitely you can read together those purports and try to, and find the answer. Some answers they will know already, automatically they will know, just because during the discussion you are bringing out the points from the purports. You're elaborating those purports, during discussion. So they will know, or for many of them, they will know the answer. But for those that they don't, it's a good idea to go into the purports. Okay.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, what I've been doing lately with older children is, giving the question and then telling them to go read the purport on their own and try to decipher the information and then write a cogent answer to the question. So, it really encourages, it really gives them the challenge that they need at that age that you're dealing with.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your question. I'm going to call on Archana Mataji to please unmute herself and ask her question now.
Hare Krishna, Mataji, thank you so much for these sessions. They're really, really helping me, even though I just started this homeschooling journey. So Mataji, my question would be, so you mentioned about deity worship elaborately in your book, as well as you've also spoken a lot about it. So at present, my daughter, who's 5 years old, she is very fond of performing Abhishek to our 2 Laddu Gopal deities. We only have Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, Mahani deities. Apart from that, we don't have Gauranga deities. But is it still okay to have her do the Abhishek So I mentioned how it's Gaurunita. I mean, I know you mentioned how it's best to have Gaurunita deities. But is it still okay for her, or should we transition to getting Gaurunita deities, or like praying for them? So.
Well, I think I really feel it's okay as long as they're guided by you,
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, children should not be left alone when they're worshiping deities. That's the main point. You always have to be there just so they learn the boundaries. They learn if you're with them, then they have fun doing it. They try to develop the mood that Krishna is a person and is so wonderful to take care of him and love him. But at the same time, they are learning from you what the boundaries are. Okay, we don't while we're worshiping the deities, we don't put our hands in our mouth, our fingers in our mouth, or things like that. So if you're there while they are bathing them and worshiping them, it's okay, because you're guiding them. Of course, children are children, and they'll make some, they'll drop things and they'll make some mistakes. But overall, issue, they will be okay. It's okay.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions right now on YouTube or Zoom. Any further questions, anyone? Okay. I'm going to invite Garima Mataji to please unmute herself and ask her question.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to change my name. This is Champaklata Sakhi.
This is Champaklata Sakhi from Atlanta.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Radhika Mataji and Arudha Mataji, for enlightening us. It's a wonderful nectarian class. I have just one question. I know, Arudha Mataji, you answered last time that it really depends on the speed of the child, how we are finishing one canto. But I know I finished one canto in 1 year, and she did a lot of activities from the book, and she enjoyed in this swan craft and activity she did. She loved it. And we are about to finish second canto. But going forward, I just want to know that, like Mataji, you mentioned last time that in your classes also you finish one chapter at one time.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
then
that's because I'm only doing discussion. I'm not doing the activities online, but if you are going to do online activities, activities from the guidebook, you will need more than one turn. You will not be able to cover it in one turn, so you will need two, at least two, right? So it's okay.
So with the only discussions and only going through translations and a little bit purport and here and there, ideally how much time it should take, Mataji?
Well, depends on how big the chapter is, but generally an average chapter of like 30 verses or 40 verses should, you can do it in 1 hour, So depends on the size of the chapter. Otherwise, you do twice, 2 times. Now, another way is just like if the chapter is very, very long, like for example, at this point, we're doing that chapter, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva, in the story of Prithu Maharaj. And before this, it was the story of instructions by the 4 Kumaras. Now, these chapters are exceptionally long, especially the one that I just mentioned about Lord Shiva. Is so long, and it's like 68 verses or something. So, and if the children are younger, so what I did was I had them read take turns reading verses like twice, and while I was discussing as well, stopping for discussion, and then the rest of the chapter I just read the chapter summary from the guidebook and finished the chapter. So and they were so satisfied because it gave a nice combination of reading from translations and then the lightheartedness of the summary, so it brought the two together, and I could see everybody was totally satisfied, so that's one of the tricks I just developed, where I thought, well, especially when you're dealing with younger children, it's harder. With older children, you can do as much as you want because they are looking for, they're looking to uh, exercise their thinking and their critical thinking. They enjoy it actually if you develop their skills, but even for older children, it may be too much, and you may adopt this method. So try to think of different ways where you can still go through the chapter, the exceptionally long chapters, which are very difficult for a child, you know. But the smaller chapters, like the average size chapters, you can go through it, especially when you're dealing with stories like Prahlad's story and all. It's nice to go through every translation because there's so much there. But you have to learn the art of the speed in terms of how fast or how slow you want to go. Like I mentioned last time, if you go too slow, the children get very restless, and if you go too fast, then they haven't really caught anything. So you will develop that as you go along. You will develop that, and not every point has to be discussed. So in that sense, I meant, you can cover the discussion in one day, and then go to the activities the next time.
Okay.
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 Now, if you're homeschooling, you're spending a longer time, then you can do both. Because the activities provides a break for them, and they're not like doing so much the reading part and the discussion part, but they have hands on something. So depends on your children, depends on how you feel about it. So the length of time really varies with different people. As long as you see the interest among the children still, if you're holding the interest all the way through, then you're doing okay, you see. But if you see the child getting really restless and distracted, then okay, it's time to change something. Okay. Of course, once in a while they need a little reprimand or a little a strong voice, okay, get to it or something. But mostly they should enjoy on their own, where they're just enjoying it. And what I used to do when I was homeschooling, I would give a little break in between, like we would read, and it would become, they're children, right? So they need something to eat, a snack or something. So we'd take a little break, and they would eat and jump around, and they would come back again. So, and they would come back again, So you can try different things, Yeah. Because we were covering a lot of subjects, like Radhika Mataji is saying, she gets them to do sometimes the questions and writing and things. So there's so much they're learning from it. It's not just about, you're also materially providing all the skills that you need to as a homeschooler, But for those who are not homeschooling, it's not necessary to do the detail of the writing and all, if you don't want to. Because it may get too much. They're already getting so much homework from school, you don't want to add on to the burden, And so they lose their taste for Bhagavatam because then they see it as another drudgery, But for homeschoolers, yes, you can actually do as much as you want to if they are willing, and you can see that it's working. Okay?
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to call on Swati Mataji to please ask a question.
Hare Krishna, Mataji's Dandat Pranam. Thank you so much for these wonderful series. Mataji, can you please share the audio file that you had played?
Sure.
And
in the chat.
Right. And also, Mataji, are there any current classes going on where, they can be enrolled, because everything is virtual right now? And especially for working parents, it may be difficult to carve the time out and just to sit with kids on our own. So, I mean, is there a forum like this right now where we could just enroll the kids?
Well, Radhika, do you have anything going where they can join virtually?
No, I only have one session that I do, for my boys, and then 2 others, and I keep it really small.
Okay.
So, but I have some classes that I'm doing for children, very minimal now. And depending on the age of your child, maybe, he can join one of those classes. Like I said, I don't encourage so much now anymore, because I really want parents to, start doing it themselves. Like even if you're working, if you were to come home and do a little bit of Bhagavatam with them, that goes a long way. You will be refreshed, you will be inspired, and so will the children be. So I know it's tiring and it's hard to find the time after you come back home, or you're doing it at home, I'm sure, during the pandemic. But if you spend a little bit of time with them, reading Bhagavatam, it really is, the results are amazing because, first of all, it brings the family together. I mean, we connect with each other spiritually in a way that we cannot connect materially. I've seen that through my experience with my children and with my family. I mean, the connection is instant. When you connect with your children through reading transcendental literature or doing any spiritual activity, it's just wonderful. So parents can develop this connection with their children, and the children start really, the communication really also grows, because Bhagavatam, it encourages thinking and asking questions. So the child starts to connect with the teacher in a way that it cannot be done any other way, because it elicits, Bhagavatam elicits, questions and thinking, and very soon you'll find your child, talking about himself, and what he's doing in school, the problems that he's facing. He'll come and tell you, or she will come and tell you more through these studies than otherwise, So I even for working parents, really what we're doing here, we know most of the people out there are not homeschooling. So what we are trying to help equip the parents who are not homeschooling as well, because is to encourage every family to actually pick up the book and actually read them with their family. I know one family in particular who's from Seattle, and both of mother and father, both are working parents. And I visited Seattle. I did a seminar, and some of the other, she took to it. And now every day, like 5 days a week, they all sit together and spend half hour reading and discussing,
Yes.
And she's taken to it, and to this day, she tells me that how her life is totally changed. So, and gradually they're increasing the time, like they find it so valuable, and they feel that their connection with the children has really deepened. And these are older children, like the girl is like 12 years old and the boy is probably 14, like that. So these are teenagers, not a very easy age. So yeah, just see it like that, how you can make this like your priority, Prabhupada says that how every activity that we do in our life should be done with the idea that how it can facilitate our hearing and chanting at the end of the day,
Yes.
In other words, yeah. So try to develop that mood and see, and just try it. Even if you do, okay, let's start with like 2 days a week. Okay. You do it every day. Let's start a little bit and then you let it expand.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Good question. I'm going to call on Ankur Prabhu now.
Hare Krishna, Mataji's dinner pranam. It's been my pleasure, like it's been 5-6 weeks. It's a live class going on and we're understanding the concepts too much in detail. Mataji, like, how did I get this inspiration? I would just like to share. You might have taken one session with, Rohini in Delhi. So here we have, a school like for homeschooling. So it's a Vasudevam Vedic school. So in Rohini Temple is administering the school. So my daughter, she goes there in Vasudevam Vedic school. So the principal, her grace Sevamurti Radhika Mataji. So she inspired me to, read Bhagavatam and all. So that is how I got inspiration. So I attended some of your sessions. I liked first session. I Googled, so I attended, you took a 9-hour session. So some 3 sessions, some 7-8 years back with your son, Radhika Raman Prabhu. So I, attended that session online in bits and pieces. My concepts, they really got shaped. So now I am doing Bhagavatam for the past 2 weeks. I'm reading Bhagavatam with my daughter. She's 6, and two of her cousins. Like my daughter has a tendency to run away. अच्छा अभी तो आपने यार कृष्णा कॉन्शियस स्कूल में भी डाल दिया और अभी इट्स टू मच कृष्णा कॉन्शियस आई वांट टू रन अवे I get my escape in terms of my cousins. I'll go and play with them. So I invited them. You come. Let's do it. So we are reading a shloka. My daughter is running away and they are enjoying. We're doing chanting. So my daughter tries to escape, and the two cousins they enjoy. So she gets, she doesn't have any option now. So she comes back. She also sits because there is a competition, obviously. So that is how the things are quite changing. And as you just mentioned that when you come from office, so this is the time actually that I come from office. Immediately we start the evening program like that. So 1 hour we enjoy this 1 hour completely. Now that was the observation. There is one question. One thing I recently tried was, I remember Radhika Man Prabhu saying that even your 1 year kid or 1.5 year kid, even they develop love for Bhagavatam. You give them the copy, let them have it. They are reading the pictures. So very recently, within this week, I tried with my son, who is like about 20 months. So he'll be 2 years in the coming April. I was just like, he was like, when we were reading the book, so he said, I need the Bhagavad Gita. I need the Bhagavad Gita, like that. I gave it to him. So he, pay obeisances to the book. He turns the pages, he reads it. So now that thing, it opened a new domain for me. That actually, I was not thinking from the perspective of Vivan. I was thinking that let him be like older and then maybe we can include him. But now I'm getting this question and curiosity. How really do I engage that 2 year who is about to be 2 years kid? How do I engage him in what sort of activities? He was just looking at your picture and he was saying, Amma, Amma. So I was mute, so he's not here now. So, I mean, this is what I want to know. How do I engage him in this thing?
Yeah. So for a 2-year-old, you can just show him pictures, from Prabhupada's books. There's so many pictures that you can show him. And then as you show him those pictures, you point out the different details in that picture. And that, so children like to see, pictures, and they like to relate with them. So, and they never get tired, and you can repeatedly show the same pictures again and again. And then you point out the peacock feather, to the flute that Krishna is playing, or whatever is happening there. You can tell them at that point. You can tell them the story because he's very young, right? So and at that point you can tell the child the story, and that way the child becomes attracted to Bhagavatam, But also, the association at home, the mood at home, the devotional atmosphere at home really rubs on children that age. In other words, if devotional activities are going in the home all day, in different varieties, chanting, hearing, deity worship, association of other devotees, so the children are automatically being trained up very nicely, So that's really, because children at that age, they learn by mimicking, by imitation. But in terms of Bhagavatam, definitely expose them to these books. I know another little girl who's been exposed very early, and she's got such a attraction. And that was really at that age that your son you're talking about, very, very early. And because all the family members at home were attached to Bhagavatam, the child naturally gets attached to Bhagavatam, So that is the key. Okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so nice to see Achintya Priyamataji from Assam. Just, really appreciate your eagerness and your enthusiasm to always be here. Feeds us an incentive to keep going. And today you're here with your friend, Satya Mataji, and she has a question.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, thank you very much for everything. I wanted to ask, Mother Arudha, or yourself experience, because I have this situation. Our son had some not so positive experience from before studying, from particularly this book. We had a small community school. Somehow he doesn't want to do Srimad Bhagavatam at the moment. We have a plan to move to community when there will be more children of his age, but at the moment he doesn't have so many children of his age to work with. What should we do? Mother Arudha already answered some part of, she answered a little bit before, how to do it together as a family. What should I do? Should I just leave it? Because we decided not to force him, just leave it. And we live in the temple, so he comes sometimes for Srimad Bhagavatam class. He does some math online. We don't do so much homeschooling at the moment because we don't want to push him. But what would you say, please, if you can help us? Thank you.
Yeah, I will answer a little bit, and if Radhika wants to also, share her thoughts, so, for example, these guidebooks are excellent for children who are not so much into the books, where you can, the arts and crafts activities and all these fun activities would be a nice way to introduce him to Srimad Bhagavatam, because he's just a little child right now. So there's not so much to worry about. He will develop that attraction once he, gets back to it. Radhika, did you want to add anything?
Just similar to what you shared, perhaps if, like you said, the child might not have had such a positive experience, then easing into it gradually. I wouldn't go to the translations from Prabhupada's book, and I would just do the activities. And, they don't even have to know this is from the Srimad Bhagavatam. The crow and the swan is just a craft activity, and the poem is just a poem, kind of garbing it in such a way that easing them into it.
Yeah, he's 10 already, but he's still young. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Was there another question from Satya Mataji?
Oh, that's everything. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Any other questions, devotees? I see a question coming in through YouTube from Sushma Arya Mataji, but it hasn't come through fully because it gets cut out. So she says her daughter is 3 to 4 years old and has started chanting recently. She does not read or hear. She attends lots of her meetings as she is I'm sorry. Okay. So her daughter is 34 years old and the daughter is a dermatologist. And she's wondering, since the daughter does not read or hear, how can she help her daughter become a devotee? Although she started chanting recently.
Okay. Yeah, well, she's chanting, so that's very nice. And just by association, we don't have to push them into doing certain things like reading. But if by association, if she has, if you invite devotees to your home and she's, is placed in the association, that will rub on her, because the mood will be very pleasant and very joyful. So in this way, by association, she can actually develop an attraction for devotees and for Krishna consciousness. So this is the same formula that we apply for young children who have not been raised in Krishna consciousness, but who have now, through their parents, have now started, being exposed to Krishna consciousness, is to develop their Krishna consciousness through association, through other peers and through other devotees. Okay.
Okay. So our last question perhaps will be again from Ankur Prabhu.
Okay, thank you, Madhavi. Mataji, as you mentioned that, when there is a spiritual atmosphere, in the house the whole day. Now there, I get like this doubt many times that when there is too much of a spiritual atmosphere, it may so happen that the children get an escape route, that okay, they will be engaged in these activities. I have to find some my platform and my thing. And if that really starts happening, then the gap keeps dividing. And I mean, somehow I get this feeling, because this is what I have experienced little. How do we understand this? Or if there is something that we should take care of, that there is more of, spiritual platform, spiritual activities in the house, and the child also gets engaged in that. So how do we understand this?
Very good question, and a very practical question. This does happen, especially with children who are going to school, because they, for several hours a day, they are picking up things that are, non-devotional, and then they come home and they see the devotional atmosphere, so they may not connect with that, and so they want to separate themselves from that. So I am not talking about an overly holier than thou type of attitude among the parents. What I meant was that automatically, if you're cooking and we're offering the food at the altar, then the child is watching and sees that and kind of picks up on that. It's not like we try to push it down their throat. And no, we shouldn't. Like Prabhupada said, we don't say no, because as soon as you say no, they're rebellious. But we simply say, give them the joys of Krishna consciousness, without saying, having this anti-attitude. We just give them the joys. In other words, we have to present Krishna consciousness in a way that, and you will know, as a parent, you will know, that how they can really catch it, and follow your instinct in that way. But yeah, don't have this whole heavy atmosphere where the child is feeling disconnected with you, okay.
Probably it will take time to digest and understand that thing. Maybe the lining is very thin.
Yeah.
So probably we will need more guidance on that part.
Yes. So just try to, whatever you can do, whatever you feel comfortable, where you can. In other words, a karmi atmosphere means that there's no connection at all in the house with Krishna. That would be a karmi atmosphere. But a devotional atmosphere, at the minimum, it would be, okay, we have a little altar, we have the deities there or pictures there, there's always, there's not that mood of intense sense gratification where everyone is trying to watch a movie or things like that, So in other words, you watch things that are decent and nice, So like that. So that's the difference, where the child is exposed to things that are basically on a spiritual level. And that is very normal. That is very normal for a child growing up in India, right? Quite normal. But nowadays, as a child is going to school, things are getting quite difficult, more difficult. The challenges are greater.
Luckily, she goes in a Vaishnav school, so probably that really, because she's going to Vasudevam Vedic, so, which is managed by Srimad.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, madam.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that has brought us to the end of our list of questions, as well as the time that we have this morning. Mataji, any closing comments?
I'm good, and I'm very happy again. And I look forward to the next class. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Saturday, same time.